Hi guys, welcome. So, I'm back again, and today I want to continue with my apparent desire to destroy Christmas. I'm just kidding. I really enjoy the Christmas season, the Yule season, whatever words you want to use, you know what I'm talking about. And I want to talk to you about some thoughts I have about the Christmas tree. And, we'll go into some history, and we'll go into some shamanism, and we'll go into some syncretic shamanism, where we'll see how this symbol comes in from multiple indigenous belief systems and shamanic practices. And I believe I'm gonna share with you some an experience that I had a little over a year ago, having to do with the world tree, the Axis Mundi. And it's rather intense. I'm a little frightened, to be honest with you, because it was a very intense experience, and I'm still I'm still reeling from it. And so perhaps by me talking about it, I'll be able to process it a little more. But it's given me a completely different viewpoint on the idea of the world tree. So we're going to talk about, first off, we're going to talk about the Christmas tree, and we're going to talk about where it came from, and what I believe is its indigenous origins. And this is something interesting I find about the Christmas tree, is that even though the Christmas tree really is, in its modern form, it really is a Christian invention. It smacks of pre-Christian Germanic paganism like nothing else I've seen. And in fact, the Christmas tree itself, with the ornaments and the type of ornaments that we put on it, I would say is what would have happened to the expression of the solstice celebration. I believe that if Christianity had never taken hold in Europe, or in fact if Christianity had never even existed at all, I believe that the worship of the Christmas tree, as we call it, we might have had a different word for it then. We might have called it the world tree, the Yggdrasil. We might have called it the Irminsul. Who knows what we would have called it. But I believe that this symbol would have evolved in the exact form that it is now. And I'm going to go into all of the symbolism that's there in it. And again, what I find so interesting is that in its modern form, it really is of Christian origin. So anyway, those are the things we're going to talk about. And towards the end, I may share with you, like I said, a personal experience I had with the world tree, the world axis, and what it has done to me and what it is currently doing to me. And we'll see. I haven't wanted to talk about it because it's been an intense experience, and not quite sure. I've been kind of avoiding it, to be honest with you. And that's not like me. So that gives you an idea of how intense it was. That I just wanted to kind of forget that it ever happened. It's one of those kinds of things. But I think it's going to be helpful for me to look at it. And anyway, we'll get there when we get there. Okay, so so I've kind of gone through what I'm going to do. Let me just get started while people are coming onto the channel, and for the Q&A, and I'll just get started with a little history. So everybody knows what a Christmas tree is, right? Everybody, let me see. Do I have a picture of a Christmas tree? I don't even know if I have a picture of a Christmas tree here. I don't think I do. Anyway, we all know what a Christmas tree is and what a Christmas tree looks like. And if you're like me, I assumed for a long time, I assumed that the Christmas tree in its current form was a holdover from pre-Christian Germanic paganism. And in fact, when it was first becoming known to be used for Christmas, the church labeled it as a pagan thing, you know, that they saw it as people worshiping a tree. And there are some obvious connections, because we have in pre-Christian pagan religions, I'm using the word pagan in more of a historical way, because I personally don't like the word pagan, nor do I like the word heathen. The reason why is because they both mean the same thing. Pagan means somebody from the country, means country bumpkin. And heathen is the same thing. A heathen is somebody who lives on the heath, somebody who lives out in the boonies. These are people who didn't live in cities, because the people who lived in cities were Christians. And so these were the first people to become Christians, were the people who lived in cities. They were civilized. And the uncivilized, the uneducated, the stupid hillbilly rednecks were the pagans. In Latin, you would have called a country person a pagan. And in English, you would have called a country person a heathen, because the heath meant the same thing. So I know people want to use these words with pride. They say, I'm a pagan and I'm proud. It's just like saying, I'm a hillbilly, I'm a hick, I'm a redneck, I'm an idiot, I'm uneducated, and I'm proud. You know, that's really what you're saying. That's why I don't like to use either of those words. And, you know, anyway, I'll stop right there before I say something I regret. So those were the people who started, interestingly enough, with the Christmas tree. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So in Roman tradition, in European tradition, pre-Christian European traditions all over the place, it was a very common custom in the winter months to take evergreen branches and put them in your house and decorate them in your house, because, you know, it was cold and it was, you know, you wanted to look at something green to remind you that spring was coming, you know, and it smells good, all that kind of good stuff. But that had a definite connection to spring, and so the winter solstice, there was a lot you would have found even thousands of years ago in somebody's dwelling. You would have found some evergreens placed probably in some ceremonial fashion in their homes. So there's nothing new about that. So the idea of putting a wreath on your door, that's a really old custom. That goes back, you know, long before Christianity. That probably continued all the way through into the Christian conversion period. And then somewhere in the Middle Ages, I don't have the exact date, I probably should, but I don't. Rural German, I believe it was, it might not have been as far back as the Middle Ages. Anyway, don't hold me to that. But whenever it started, it was a while ago, whenever it started, these were rural German German people who lived in the country. They started decorating trees and bringing them into their home. And they would put things like candied apples and hang them from the trees, and spiced, you know, meats and candies and stuff like that. And so they would hang these things on the tree. And this was something they did for Christmas. And so we can see the general connections there. There's still this desire to show the earth and its bounty, giving of these sweet, candied, beautiful things, because it represents, you know, when spring comes and the fruit and the flowers and the trees and everything is going to start blooming again. So it's clear that this is what the symbolism is. They called them paradise trees because the apples represented the fruit of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil that Adam and Eve ate. By the way, the Old Testament myth of that, there is no mention of an apple. We don't know what the fruit was. Whatever it was the fruit. It was the forbidden fruit. So why is it that we in Europe started thinking of the apple as the forbidden fruit? Well, the apple goes back to, at least in the Germanic tradition, goes back to Iduna, the goddess of apples, who gives the apples of immortality to the gods. And that's how the gods, without it, the gods are not immortal. They need to consume these apples of immortality. And it's very similar to the Vedic tradition with Indra, the god of lightning and thunder, who was the king of the gods in the Vedic times. And he drank soma. And that would be equivalent to Thor or Thunar drinking mead, and represents life force energy, represents chi, prana. And so even the gods are dependent upon life force energy in order to stay alive and to be immortal. So anyway, that's why, by the way, the Christian tradition started looking at the apple as the forbidden fruit, because there's still this understanding, even though what's interesting about these symbols is that we are still acknowledging the symbolism of our pre-Christian polytheist heritage. We're still acknowledging it. It's coming out unconsciously. I don't believe that those rural Germans decided, let's start a whole new pagan tradition and we'll just pretend that it's Christian. I don't think they did that. I think they honestly were looking for ways to enjoy their Christian celebration, and this was something that just came out of them. And the symbolism is very clear. And so you can Christianize it by putting the apple there, right? And saying, oh, the apple. And of course, by the way, when it comes to Christmas, we've already talked about this. Jesus, even if he were real, according to the biblical tradition, was not born December 25th. That was something that the Christians imposed upon the solstice celebration, because even though, hundreds of years after being converted to Christianity, people were still celebrating a lot of these solstice traditions, like the Yule log and all kinds of things. And so these were traditions that the church couldn't get rid of. So they decided, well, we got to do something with it. Let's just paste the Jesus symbol on there. And of course that works really well, because Jesus dies and resurrects, and again it folds right into the solstice. The gods, the sun gods that die and are resurrected. So it worked out really well, because on a symbolic level it matched. So that's why we do that now. But it makes me wonder how many Christians actually know that Jesus was not born on December 25th and all that ridiculous nonsense. In any case, I've been fascinated with the Christmas tree. Like probably many of you. I mean, I grew up in a Protestant Christian home, so we had Christmas trees, and it was a big deal when I was a little kid. We would go to the Christmas tree lot and we would buy one, and then we stopped doing that, and we were really upset about that why are we using a fake tree and all that, because it was just so fun to get the tree and then to decorate it, put the decorations on it. I mean, it really was. I mean, looking back on it, it was a lot of fun. But if I look back on it, in terms of my physical body, in terms of my unconscious, it was a religious experience. It was a shamanic experience. It was a ritual. And you really do, whether you realize it, you are worshiping that tree. Not only are you putting all of the lights on it, and you're putting all of the decorations on it, but you're putting presents underneath it. And, so it's obvious that this tree is representing the abundance of life, that is giving of life. And we're worshiping this. When I became a Christian, I remember, having this conflict with myself, because I loved Christmas trees. But I felt so guilty. I was I was so dogmatic, especially early on in my late teens and early 20s, that I felt that I was being, an idolater. Because, I wasn't stupid. I realized I was worshiping this tree, and I enjoyed worshiping this tree. And so I had this idea that instead of a tree, we should just stick a cross. And I remember having a girlfriend at the time, and she just thought that was ridiculous. And looking back on it, it was. Nobody ever wanted to do that. So, nobody ever wanted to do that. So we never did that. But so I in recent years, I just assumed that the Christmas tree was a holdover from paganism, but it really is kind of a modern expression. And I guess what I'm saying here is that, you know, we can try and cover it up, even like me when I was a full-blown hardcore Christian. You cannot get rid of these impulses that are within us that want to worship nature and especially want to acknowledge the tree of life and what the tree of life represents. So I'm going to get into that, and we're going to start getting into what, from a shamanic perspective, what the tree of life is. I love this picture here. This is, let me see. I love this picture here of Yggdrasil because this is how I experience the tree of life. It's not just the tree of life, it's the Axis Mundi. It's the pole of the worlds. It's the nexus place of everything. It's, you know, it's the power of what we would call the world tree is phenomenal. And I would liken it to the power of Ginnungagap, that same kind of intense power. You know, that when you get, if you were to climb into the nexus, the world tree, I mean, I don't see it as a thing, I see it as a energetic vortex. If you were to climb into it, I think you'd be annihilated because it's just too powerful. You know, you can't stay in a definite form and, you know, go into that energy without it just saying, you know, we're going to destroy you. Not because it's trying to kill you, but because it's going to the energetic essence of things, which, you know, this here is, you know, the reason this body has to die is because it's limited. It's not infinite. It's really just, you know, it's like when you put on 3D virtual reality glasses. My physical body, my brain are literally those 3D, you know, glasses for the soul. This is not me. You know, this is barely a two-dimensional, three-dimensional projection of me. So anyway, those are my thoughts about that. We'll get into that a little more as we go on. I'll check and see if there's anybody on and if there are any questions. And again, the best way to interact with me is to leave a question. The best way to do that, again, this is for the live Q&A, not for the, if you're watching this and you're just putting a comment in the YouTube video, that's not what I'm talking about. But if you're live watching this in the Q&A, please type in all caps question so that I can differentiate your actual question for me as opposed to all of the other comments and the discussion that's going on between people. And I'd prefer it if people hold off on the comments and the discussion so that I can view that. However, I do like you guys to enjoy the discussion, but makes it easier for me the less stuff I have to scroll through. So let's see who's on. We got 10 people on, so not a lot of people right now. Okay, so Emerson's Bike, Coffee and Rum Shop, thank you. She dropped down $2 on the super chat for me. Thank you for that. All right, so let me see here. Am I seeing a question? Sean 303, question. Were mountains once trees of life that were taken down? No. I think you're getting that from, there's a, you know, one of these new sort of, it's a conspiracy kind of thing. It's something, oh, we're trying to hide the truth. That, you know, I forget what they're called. Anyway, but you can find them all over the place. There are these mountains that look like tree stumps. They look like giant tree stumps that have been cut. And, you know, all you have to do is go and analyze the rocks of those trees and you'll find out that it's basalt. It's, you know, it's the guts of volcanoes. So what you're looking at there, you know, volcanoes, you know, they have a plug in them, which means, you know, the lava will come up, and if it's not, you know, whatever, if it's not erupting, it'll sort of come up and it'll sort of create a plug. And so that's what's left. But you know, around the plug will be the actual mountain, because what happens is the the lava comes up like this, and then the mountain creates like a crack, and you get a mountain out of it. So what ends up happening is that the Earth's crust is moving, and there's these, the reason why you see like chains of volcanoes is because you've got this volcanic vent where the lava's coming up, and the crust is going over it like this, so these mountains come up like this. That's why you have a string of mountains, and only one of them will be active, the one on the bottom or the top or whatever. The rest of them will be dormant, because the crust is moving while the lava keeps wanting to come up. And so what happens is the lava will come up, and then it will solidify, and then it'll create this plug. And so after thousands or maybe millions of years, the dirt and everything surrounding it will erode, and what you'll have left is this rock that looks like a tree trunk, but it's not. It's the plug of an ancient, probably millions of years old volcano. And that is well known in scientific circles. So again, this goes back to that there's a whole bunch of them, the electric universe, this one about the, giants existed in the forests that they won't tell us. It's just, if you just put a little bit of effort into wanting to actually look at some science, you'll find out that it's not it. So anyway, no, mountains were not trees of life that were taken down. No, that's not what they were. All right, so I don't see any more questions here, so I'm going to keep on talking here. So let me take a look and see what I was going to look at here. So, all right, so Christmas trees have their origins in Germany, and I thought it was in the Middle Ages, but I could be wrong about that. Probably late Middle Ages. And again, what I find really interesting is what they used to decorate them. Now, again, I'm coming from the assumption that these rural German Christians were not looking for some way to be polytheists or pagans. They were being Christians, but because this is so deeply ingrained in our ancestral knowledge, and probably so deeply ingrained within our DNA, these customs, that it had to come out again. It found a way to come out. By the time we get into the Middle Ages, we've gone through a lot of the persecution. The persecution has died down, and so, there isn't this active, militant effort by the church to track down the pagans and kill them and punish them. People are fairly comfortable. I mean, there were still the witch trials and all that kind of stuff, but I think then things had calmed down to the point where this DNA within them, because what's interesting, the continental Germanic pagans, we've lost a lot of their traditions. There's still a lot of folk tales that come out, especially like in some of the still rural places in the mountains of, like Bavaria, and the Alps and stuff like that. We still see some old things like the Perchtenlauf. Again, in the solstice period, we still see some of these things that are still there. But there's this well-known story of in continental Germany that the pagans worshipped Thor, and they worshipped this oak tree. Apparently, this oak tree was massive, and so it was a very sacred site to them. Having had an experience that I've had recently, I now have a much greater appreciation for what I think they were doing there at that tree. But this is where they worshipped Thor. And as the legend goes, this Christian missionary decided that it angered him that these German pagans were worshiping this tree, and obviously, it was competition for him because he was out there trying to convert them to Catholicism. So he chopped the tree down, and as the legend goes, everybody was waiting for him to get struck by lightning, because Thor and lightning and the oak tree and all that. And the guy didn't get struck down by lightning, so he used that as the premise to say, see, your god Thor is worthless, convert to Christianity. And there's even more propaganda. There's some other versions of it that say that these German pagans were seeking to sacrifice an infant to Thor at the base of the tree. So again, this is, looking to get that propaganda. I'm sorry, I can't believe that. I just can't believe that they were doing that. But you've got to use that. If you want to go onto Fox News and you want to sell your propaganda, you have to have a good story. See, we're saving the world because those guys they sacrificed babies to Thor, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But the point I'm trying to make is that their connection to trees and their connection to worshiping of trees was a very deeply ingrained into the Germanic mindset for tens of thousands of years, I'm quite sure. And so for it to stop like that, it had to have just been boiling under the surface. And so it makes, it's no surprise to me that, as opposed to like Iceland or even Scandinavia, which are countries that turned Christian, there was still a lot of their pre-Christian influences that still were allowed to come out, and they were a lot more tolerant, especially in Iceland. Iceland, was very, and to this day in Iceland, the government recognizes the existence of elves. And whenever they have to build a road or something like that, and there's, these big boulders, which is they believe that the elves live in these boulders, they will get a shaman to go and communicate with the elves. I mean, the government will go and get a shaman to communicate with the elves to see if the elves will either move or if they'll give permission or to say no. And then they, it's to this day. I find that really wonderful. But in any case, so imagine these, in continental Germany, paganism was a very deeply held tradition. And so it took a lot of effort, by the Holy Roman Empire and by Catholicism, and a lot of killing. They killed and murdered a lot of continental German. The massacre at Verdun is one I've mentioned. But no doubt there were many more that never made it into the history books. So I guess what I'm saying is that I find it very understandable that this Christmas tree tradition sprang up in rural Germany because the gods and the spirits are still there. They're trying to make their way out through us. So I said earlier in the beginning, and I still believe that if Christianity had never existed and or never taken hold in Europe, I believe that the worship of what we now call the Christmas tree, I believe it would have evolved probably exactly in the way that it is right now. And I'll give you one example of that. Here's, again, I told you that what they were doing to this paradise tree, as they called it, these Christians, they were taking apples, like spiced apples, candied apples, and they were hanging them on the branches of these trees. And so that became what we now see as your typical Christmas ornament. And what does that remind you of? Well, when I look at a Christmas tree with those bright shining balls hanging around them, what I see is Yggdrasil and the 9 worlds. Because why else would you come up with that? And in fact, these kinds of ornaments here, where they first came from was Germany, and Germany would make them, and they were known for making these glass baubles, as they're called, and they'd ship them all over the world for Christmas decorations. So I just find that very interesting that the old ways and the old shamanic ways never really die. They just find new ways to come out, and you can paste whatever label you want on top of them, but that's really what they are. So that's that. I really love that. I really do have a special place in my heart for Christmas trees. I don't do them because I haven't been settled in one place for a long time. I don't like the idea of buying a tree that's going to die and all that kind of stuff. If I lived out in the woods, I think I would probably just decorate one of the living, younger trees that were growing up. I like doing that. But anyway, so All right, so now let's go a little further, and I want to talk to you about other representations of what I believe the Christmas tree represents, which again, it comes down to what's called the Axis Mundi, which is the axis upon which all of the worlds are held, which is what Yggdrasil is, the world tree. And again, I've had a personal experience that has given me a much greater respect and awe, and I would even go so far as fear of that space of the Axis Mundi. I mean, it's just such an incredibly powerful thing, and I'm going to get into that. But let's talk about other things that were used. There was what's called, I'm looking for it here in my notes, I don't have it, but it was called a Jupiter column. So sorry about that, I accidentally clicked on Odin there. Looking for, did I put a Jupiter column in here? I did not put a Jupiter column in here. So let me see if I can find a Jupiter column, if you're not familiar with those. These are things that that Romans erected in Germany when they were conquering Lower Germany. They put these things, which were called Jupiter columns. And they're called Jupiter columns because on the top there is some representation of the god Jupiter, with all of his, his lightning bolts, or there will be Jupiter fighting a giant. Who does that sound like? Sounds a lot like Thor, doesn't it? And as it so happens, the custom in pre-Christian Germany was that they would worship these oak trees, and these oak trees were sacred to Thor. So I just find it interesting. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if the Romans were tapping into, knowingly, consciously tapping into the shamanic indigenous traditions, and they're, instead of Thor and the oak tree, they're using the equivalent, which would be Jupiter and a Jupiter column. But either way, I find it interesting that all that energy is happening around in that area, which had such a strong connection. And one of the areas that, went so far the other way. I mean, when you think about Germany, again, as opposed to Iceland or Scandinavia, who we've got the same tradition there, things were much less dogmatic, and there was probably much less persecution, and so people could, still play around with their pagan traditions and not get into too much trouble. But you couldn't do that in continental Germany, especially in the Middle Ages. You couldn't do that. And it went so far the other way. This is the beginning of like Lutheranism. So the beginning of Protestant Christianity. The Christianity that you see today that is so dogmatic and so fear-filled and so full of hate and so full of racism and all the horrible things that go along with them. Well, what happens with people when they become what's the word I want to look for? When they become conquered, right? When you become conquered by another nation or by another thought process or a religion or something like that, you fight against it, and then at some point you knuckle under, and then the what's called the Stockholm syndrome kicks in, which is then you start to identify with your captors, and then what you see is people overcompensating. So I believe this is what happened in Germanic culture as well, and then you end up with Lutheranism, which is they believed that Catholicism was too pagan, and so they were going to reform the Reformation. They were going to reform Catholicism, and that's then you get this really dogmatic form of Christianity, which we see now in Bible-believing Protestant fundamentalist Christianity. It came out of that. And what I'm trying to say is that this is coming from the nature of all people. This is my assumption. The nature of all people is to be shamanic, is to be polytheist, is to be nature worshippers. And our ancestors had such a strong moral ethic connected to protecting the earth and worshiping nature and protecting trees and protecting forests and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then they were fed over time very strong propaganda telling them that their natural instincts were evil and that to worship nature was to worship the devil. And if you know, and so still you've got that tribal Germanic warrior ethic which wants to fight against evil. And so what ends up happening is they start fighting against their own nature. And now then you end up having these purges, and you have the Reformation, and you have witch trials, and you have all that kind of stuff. What's really happening is that you've got that natural desire to fight for life and fight for nature, and now it's turned in on itself. And as we've seen, you know, if there's one thing German people do pretty damn good, it's fight. You know, and so now they're fighting against Mother Nature. Anyway, I'm sort of kind of getting off the subject here, but let me see. So the Irminsul, I don't have a picture of it. The Irminsul, we don't really know what that was, but we know that it was possibly a tree trunk, but it just represents basically a big giant phallic symbol, and it was worshipped. And I think it was worshipped as the tree of life, as the axis of the world. And that's why I believe there's a possibility that these Roman Jupiter columns were used in Germany as well, because I think and that's where you find them. They're of Roman origin, but you find them in Germany. And I believe they did that because they were wanting to find ways to connect to the you know, the non-civilized German population. But that is a very Indo-European concept, this idea of the phallic symbol and worshiping it. And this is still done today in the only remaining Indo-European religion that has continued uninterrupted since prehistory, and that is the Hindu Vedic tradition, and they worship the same phallic symbol, but they call it a Shiva lingam. And that picture, I believe, is from a temple. Now, it doesn't quite look the same. It doesn't look quite as phallic because it's kind of short and stumpy, but it's the same thing. But what you can't see in that picture is that the Shiva lingam is sitting in like a little bowl, and then there's this little spout that comes out of it. And so what the priest will do is he'll come and he'll pour milk over it, and the milk will come down, and they'll wash it with milk, and then it will come out this little spout at the end. And so you've got this clear representation of the union of the male and the female, because the bottom part is the female and the phallic part is the male. And this is the Shiva lingam. Shiva is the representation of the masculine, but you can't have Shiva without the representation of the feminine as well. So this worship still goes on. So this is a very fundamental worship within Indo-European religion, and I guess what I'm saying is that that's where the tradition of the Christmas tree comes from. Let me find, where's my Christmas tree? There it is. So I think that's what this symbol is trying to do here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and see who's online, and we'll talk about some more stuff. I'm going to really start talking about, instead of the tree of life, it's also the tree of death. And I want to talk to you about transformation and what the axis, this fulcrum of all of the worlds, this nexus point of all of the worlds is. And I will probably share my experience with you about that. So let me first see who's online, and see if we've got any questions and that sort of thing. All right, so looking for the questions. Nope, I already answered that one. Okay, sorry for the silence. I'm looking for the questions here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, very good. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of do some business here. I'm feeling kind of, if I sound like I'm out of it a little bit, I am, because this what I'm about to share with you was so profound, and I'm feeling a little bit like I'm going in and out of my body here, because this is such an intense experience for me. Bear in mind that this thunder wheel that I'm teaching you guys, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, please go to thunderwizard.com and you can see where I talk about that. You can go onto my channel, the YouTube channel. And by the way, there's a lot of people apparently don't know this. When you go on somebody's channel, there's a top bar at the top. You can type anything there and see anything on YouTube. But underneath where it says thunderwizard.com, you will see another menu. You know, videos, playlists, and then there's, you go across and it says about. Right next to about is a little magnifying glass. If you click on that magnifying glass, another search bar will come up and you can search inside my channel. And I recommend you do that. If there's something that you don't like, especially if you have a question, most of the questions I get I've already answered in some video. Go there and type it in there. So type in thunder wheel, and you'll see all the stuff that comes up about the thunder wheel. This is a thunder wheel. You can call it a medicine wheel if you want. I prefer not to use that because I'm not Native American, nor have I been trained in any Native American tradition. I see the obvious connection there, but I don't use that word for that reason. But you can call it that if you want. And I want you to bear in mind that this wheel that you've been working with, here's another representation of it. And this is an actual Nordic symbol called the Eyjashjálmur, which means the helm of awe. It was meant to put fear into enemies, and you would either paint it on your forehead or you put it on the inside of your cap. That's why they called it the helm, like your helmet. You put it on inside your helmet, you'd wear it over your third eye. Warriors would wear it over their third eye, and they had a belief that it would put awe and fear into their enemies. And so I want you to understand that this thunder wheel really is an incredibly powerful thing, and what you are creating when you use them, especially when you empower them, is you are creating this nexus. You are creating this gateway, not just between one world and another, but a nexus that will create a gateway to all of the other 8 worlds. It's an incredibly powerful and sacred thing. Anyway, so let me do that. I'm going to take a little bit of a break here and do some ads, and I'll come back and see if there are any questions. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Whoops. There we go. All right, so I'll check and see if there are any questions, and then I'll go deeper into the teaching, which I'm kind of avoiding because it's a little very intense for me. So let's see here. Do I see any questions here? I don't believe I see any questions here. We've got 21 people watching, so you guys are wrapped in attention waiting for me to talk. Okay, so, all right. So again, let me show you my representation of, well, not my representation, a picture that to me represents my experience of the world tree. It's not just a tree growing out of the ground, it's going up into the heavens, and it's going down through into the underworld, and then all the other worlds are coming in, and it's you know, it's just this incredibly powerful dynamic thing that's this vortex, this the apex of all of the energy of the universe. You know, I don't use the word God, but you know, the closest thing to God would be that. So I guess I'll just go in and share my experience here. I've been kind of avoiding this. I haven't been wanting to talk about it. Scares the crap out of me, but I will. In October of last year, my spiritual wife, my fiance, and I were up in the mountains here. I've spent a lot of my adult life hiking the mountains here of the western United States, especially the Sierras. If you've never been to the Sierras, I highly recommend it, you know, before it's too late. Go see Sequoia National Park. Go see, you know, the highest mountain in the continental United States is Mount Whitney, which is on the east side of the southern Sierra. 14,000 something feet. But some of the most incredible wilderness is up there. But we also have some local mountains here in surrounding Los Angeles. And you don't hear a lot about them, but we do have some. And so we used to go up there, you know, about 1 week every month, because I lived there for a while, but I love hiking in the mountains, and it's only an hour drive from where I'm at. And so we would go and spend a week every month up there, and we had this special place that we would go, and we would hike and all that. And I decided I wanted to try something different, and so we stayed in a different area, and we tried a new path, a new hiking path. And from the very beginning of the hike, there was this intensity. She and I never fought, but it was like something was trying to happen, and I could feel it. And I was feeling a lot of intense feelings. And I was talking about stuff, like I was becoming aware of a lot of my unconscious fears and stuff, and they were coming up, and I was verbalizing them. And you know, we're walking in this really great forest, and some of the biggest pine trees in the world are even down here. And one of them is called the sugar pine. So if you want to Google what a sugar pine looks like, you'll see. We've got them in the Sierras and the lower elevations, and we got them up here in the local mountains. And so we're walking along, and there's a lot of pine trees and some sugar pines. And we're just leisurely walking along the path, and I see another path sort of go off of the main path, and I decided I kind of wanted to go off that, so we started walking down. And we're walking down, and it's coming to a dead end. There's like a ravine down there. And I see in the distance, I see what looks like a stone hut. And it caught my eye in between the trees, and it looked like something out of Lord of the Rings. You know, it's like, it's not impossible for something like that to be out in these, you know, woods, but it's very unusual. You know, it's rangers, you know, it wasn't a cabin, and rangers would have built something out of wood that would have looked like a cabin. So to see something that looked like it was pulled out of medieval Europe and plopped it was just wasn't quite right, and it was in between. And I'm looking at it, and I'm asking myself, "Am I seeing that?" And then Lisa is right behind me, and she says, "Do you see that?" And I said, "You see it too?" She goes, "Yeah." And we both like, that's really weird. And we both had this really, we were both kind of freaked out. And she says, "I'm scared." And I stopped and I said, "Why are you scared?" She says, "I don't know. Something about this is really scaring me." And so I said, "I'm going to check this out." So we kept walking, and then all of a sudden the trees, I think the trees were sort of blocking the way. And I could see right where it was, because I never took my eyes off of where it was, but it wasn't there anymore. And I said, "I'm going to walk over there. There's something over there. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to walk over there." So I climbed down the ravine, and I walked over, and I went to the place. And where that stone hut, you know, a little wizard's hut is what it looked like, where it would have been, there was an oak tree. So we have oak trees here in California, but they're not like, you know, the giant oaks of, you know, like the oaks that they had in Europe. But, you know, I know what an oak tree represents. It represents Thor, Thunar. Now, I had been worshiping Jupiter. I off and on work with Jupiter because, especially Thunar, I work with Thunar in the Jupiterian form. And I do that because he called me a long time ago and told me that he wanted me to do that. And I am not unaware of the significance of what that is. So you'll get a better idea of why I'm the Thunder Wizard. I have Jupiter retrograde in my 8th house, and I'm going through a Jupiter Mahadasha. A Mahadasha is a time period which can go for, you know, decades, years, and I've been in a Jupiter Mahadasha for some time now. It means that Jupiter has an effect on me. And so what you do is, like, if you find out, you know, like, okay, you're in a Jupiter Mahadasha, you want to see where Jupiter is in your chart. Oh, Jupiter's in your 8th house. What does that mean? It means that during that time period, you're going to get the effects of the 8th house on all of your life. Radical transformation. Jupiter is a teacher. And so Jupiter in the 8th house is the epitome of the lightning that comes from Jupiter. So that tells you why I am who I am. It's in my chart, and it's been activated and been activated for, you know, I don't know how many years now, a few years now. And certainly when it got activated is when I started creating this thunder path. So you can see how all this stuff comes together. Now, as it so happened, Lisa had a very similar chart to me. In fact, a lot of our we were both Leos, Leo ascendants. We both had Moon in the 1st house. We both had Saturn in the 6th house and Jupiter in the 8th house. And so we aligned on a lot. It was like, you know, we felt like we were each other. There was so much similarity. So she's going through the same thing, right? She's experiencing that same thing. So I'm not unaware that as I go to this oak tree, and now I'm sitting under this oak tree, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, I don't know what I'm looking for. Is like, is there some little elf going to come out as some, you know, some person with horns on their head? I don't know what's going to happen here. Looking for some kind of an orb. I don't know. I'm kind of like thinking to myself, am I just getting silly now? Am I just turning into some new age silly nutcase? And so I'm, you know, I get to the tree and I start looking around, and I get this feeling like somebody's tapping me on the shoulder and says, "Turn around." So I did. So I knew that the oak tree was there trying to show me something, and was like, whatever essence was around that oak tree said, "Turn around." So I turned around with my back to the oak tree, and then I saw something that you could not have seen from the trail, because when we went there, we saw you couldn't have seen it. It was close to the trail, but you wouldn't have seen it. And don't ask, I'm not going to tell you where it is. Because if you're meant to find it, you'll find it. And so what I see is I turn around and I see this, as I think about it, it's all coming back to me. What I see is this, looks like a small little mountain of granite rock, you know, and it's very ancient looking. I'll show you a picture of it. And coming out of this granite rock that's coming out of the bottom of this ravine is this huge what looks like a single sugar pine. And so I'm doing this. And I went into trance. I could feel it. I could see. I knew immediately I was looking at the world tree. I knew it. I was in the presence of the world tree. And this feeling overcame me, and I realized that, you know, that Thor had said, "Come here." You know, he did something to get our attention, and then said, "Come here." And I had to go to that oak tree, because if I hadn't walked to the oak tree, I wouldn't have seen the other tree of life. And I get to the oak tree, and I turn around, and I see this thing, and I go into trance, and I don't really remember all the stuff that happened. I remember I got very emotional. I couldn't really move, and I was struck with this feeling of, what do you want? If there's something that you want, now's the time to ask for it. So I went through in my head very quickly all the things that I want, and a bunch of things came to mind, you know, very superficial stuff, and I said, I'm not going to waste this opportunity on that stuff. That stuff's easy to get. And I started thinking about this path, this thunder path. And I started thinking about transformation. And then the feeling started coming to me. How much are you willing to give for this? And how serious are you about this? And are you prepared to let us expand you to the point, you know, how much transformation are you willing to bring to the world? And so in that, when you're in that presence, like you're at the foot of the gods and they're asking you, you know, I don't remember what, but I tried to expand my imagination to go as, you know, as transformative as I could. And to say, yes, this is, you know, it was obviously a very frightening experience. And I'll tell you, I felt like I was in the presence of death. And I don't mean death in the sense of like horror movies. I don't mean death in like looking at a corpse. I mean Gnungagap. That it felt like I walked into that, and that it was actually killing me. If I had stayed there, I was afraid I would die. It was so intense. And as it so happened, and I'm having this experience, and I don't know how long I was in trance as I'm looking up at the tree, and I think tears are coming down my face as I'm like this, and all this is going on. And Lisa says, "Mike, Mike, Mike." And she finally yelled at me, and I said, "What?" She said, "I've been like yelling at you for a while now. What's going on?" And I said, I can't, I don't know. I can't put it into words. And I said something to the effect of, you know, we're in a sacred spot. We're in a holy, this is a power vortex. And so we were both looking at the tree. I didn't feel that I had the right to approach the mound. I got as close to the bottom of the mound as I felt comfortable. Not the mound, but the big giant rocks. Big giant rock where the tree was coming out. But Lisa climbed up. She climbed up the back, and she took a picture, and she came down and all that. And I think that was significant, because it was right after that. That was the last trip she and I took together. And that was the last time that we spent any significant time together, because right after that, she started getting really sick. And that was, you know, took about a year, and then she passed. And so that's why I haven't talked about it. Because what had happened to me right after that, is then I had a hernia. My hernia blew out. You know, I had an inguinal hernia, and I had to spend a lot of time in you know, wait to get an operation. And then I got an operation, and then I had to heal, and so all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's like something tapped me. But, and at this moment, I won't go back to that place. You know, you hear about people that stay away from certain, you know, places and certain areas because it's too sacred, and it's like you don't go there. I won't go back there. And this place is also a sanctuary for bald eagles. So the symbolism is kind of unavoidable here. But all right, you guys are now dying to see. Just you know, the pictures do not do it justice. But just know that this was how it felt to me. And I hesitate to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And this is what I saw. This is the I tried to get the best angle, but this is when I felt like something tapped me on the shoulder and say, turn around. I turned around and I saw this. Now, it doesn't end there. Again, you can't see it. That picture just doesn't do it justice. It was an enormous tree on top of that big rock outcropping out of there. But Lisa went up there and she took a picture, and it turns out it wasn't just one tree. It was a twin tree. So I could go on about, she's my twin soul and all that kind of stuff, and we did make that connection, and we felt that's why it was. Now, of course, she after that, just pretty much right after that trip, she started getting really sick, and then she went off to Europe and was gone for 5 months, and then came back, and then she was in and out of the hospital, and then she passed away a couple of months ago. And so I've been like, well, what the hell happened? What was that all about? I have no doubt that this was Thor's doing. I have no doubt that this is the influence of Jupiter. I have Jupiter in the 8th house. You have Jupiter in the 9th house. That's nice. You have Jupiter in the 10th house. That's Jupiter's happy. Jupiter, you put Jupiter in the 8th house, and Jupiter is deep, crazy, shamanic, transformative truth. Deep truth, and life to death kind of stuff. It's not stuff you want to play around with. So, and on top of that, my Jupiter is retrograde, which means he's really going deep. So I have a lot of respect for Jupiter. Just to give you an idea, that's what we're talking about with this. That's what the thunder wheel is. It is this nexus point, this vortex where all of the worlds come together. So this is what you're using when you do your rituals. This is why it's really important to understand what each of the directions mean and what the quality of the energy is that's coming into the center of the circle. This is the kind of power that you're dealing with. So here I am, I'm creating this tradition, I've created all this and blah, 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 and now all of a sudden it's like I have this visitation by the world tree. I don't even know how to classify it in my mind. So anyway, there's that. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. So let me go ahead and once again we'll take a break here, and I'll come back and see if there are any questions, and we'll take it from there. All right, so I'm back again. I wish I had found some way to give you some scale. That tree was enormous. It's hard to tell just by looking at it, but you know, when you see the two things come together, if you were to stand a person there, there would have been a person just kind of barely fitting in between. I mean, it was just huge. These twin trees were just enormous. Okay, so let me take a look and see what's going on. If you guys have any questions about anything, I'll be happy to answer them. Let me go back here. Let's see here. Question. If Thor is Jupiter, who is the moon? Isn't Thor the protector of the moon? Or am I wrong on that? You are not wrong on that. Thor, his name means Thu-nar, or his name is Thu-nar. Nar means first cause or lord. Thu means the moon, but it also means ambrosial nectar, means eternal, the nectar of eternal life. So he is the first cause of the nectar of eternal life. He is the Lord. That's where we get the word, when we try and find a word for it. Lord of the moon, Lord of life force energy. But he's more than just the Lord of it, like protecting over it. He is the first cause. He's the essence of it. Jupiter is connected with the ether element. The ether element is expansive, and in the Chinese tradition, we don't call it ether, we call it wood, because it's that expansive nature. So all of those things are Jupiter. So Thu-nar is really a lunar expression of Jupiter. Now Jupiter loves the moon. Jupiter is its happiest when it is in Cancer. Cancer is the sign, is the moon sign. So when you get moon and Jupiter together and you put this together, you get Thu-nar. This is what the essence of Thu-nar is. You know, there's no coincidence that my Dharma Devata is moon. So what it means is that, you know, and the reason why I worship Thu-nar, when I want to get lunar energy, I worship Thu-nar because he's the first cause of that. I'm connecting to the moon as well as connecting to this shaman energy that I have, which is Jupiter retrograde in the 8th house. So this is why I'm a transformative teacher. This is why, you know, if I can just be talking like this without getting super intense and I share with people, you know, those of you who've had readings from me, you know, by the end of the reading, you're kind of like, I just need to process this because the information is intense. The energy is intense. And people are like that even when they work with me in person. I'm just talking like I am now. And at the end, people are like, I just have to go home and sort of, you know. That's just how Jupiter works through me. Doesn't mean I am intense, but I'm not like getting really in your face with my intensity. That's not what I'm doing. So that's Thu-nar. Indra is the Vedic, and Indra is Inthu-ra. Ra is the sun, also means king, Raja. Ra is the sun. Thu is the same. It's the life force energy, the drop, the dewdrop, the drop of Soma, the moon, the mind. And In means bright, full, and it means the self as well, the Isa rune. It means the light of the full moon. So Indra has a lot of fiery energy. So Indra is if you want to connect to a solar Jupiter deity, Indra is a solar Jupiter deity. Thu-nar is a I just heard a bang outside, that's why I'm looking. Thu-nar is the lunar Jupiter energy. So, you know, some of the Vedic gods, like the Hindu gods, you can be very clear about this god is this planet. You know, they've gotten that really down. As you go back further in time, which is the Germanic tradition, is a more ancient representation of the Indo-European, then it's not as clear cut. So you'll have a deity will have multiple planetary aspects to it. Okay. Mani is the Norse moon deity. That's true. If you just want to deal with the moon, but remember Mani is, I don't know if you're familiar with my work, but Mani is the Old Norse pronunciation for moon. The original was Man, which is also how you describe humans. Humans are Man. Man means mind, and it also means moon. So just saying Mani is the Norse moon deity is just saying moon is the moon. That's just the way they pronounced moon. So that's all. Yeah, Thor. Yeah, Thor is lunar. He's the cause of the mind. And if you talk to Vedic scholars, a lot of people don't know this, but Vedic scholars will say people don't know this, but Indra is a god of the mind. If you worship Indra, your third eye will open, and if you worship Indra, he's going to give you a good brain to use, which is why I get so annoyed when I hear, some heathens, especially. I can't remember the guy's name. It's probably a good thing, but the founder of, what we perceive as modern, neo-heathenism, the guy who's the racialist guy. I heard him talking about Thor, and the way he talked about Thor, you would think Thor was some idiot who had no self-control, and that he was just rash and had this temper, and he'd fly off the handle, and he didn't think things through. And, obviously this guy has absolutely no understanding, no intuitive understanding. Anybody who's connected, if you connect to Thunar, one of your first impressions is going to be, you're going to feel this light, airy, really sort of peaceful, beautiful, like you're floating in the clouds. And that's what Thunar feels like. You can get involved into the energy of it as well, but this is what bothers me. People don't this is why we need to do more research. We can't just start throwing things out there and looking at surface things and think we know what the hell we're talking about. Thunar is a god of the mind. That was Black Earth Productions. By the way, let me just go ahead and give a plug for his YouTube channel. Go to Black Earth Productions. He's got some really phenomenal teachings there, and you can go to blackearthproductions.com, productions with a Z.com. So let's see. Let me see if there's more stuff here. Black Earth Productions question: can you tell us what your perspective is on Saturnalia? I can't, because I know nothing about it. So I'm not going to talk about something I know nothing about. I know, yeah, just I know of it, and that's pretty much it. So sorry, my friend, I'm not going to be able to answer that. All right, so let's see. Looking for the questions. Is Thor in Asgard? Yes and no. If you read the myths, you know that Thor is not a constant in the myths when the gods are in Asgard. Lots of times something's going on in Asgard and Thor is returning from the east. So Thor is in Asgard, but like Indra, his direction is the east. So in fact, the Lord of the Eastern direction is Indra in the Vedic tradition, and he's the same in our tradition, although our ancestors didn't break it down to that precise of a scenario. Although it's very clear that he goes off into the east all the time. He's always off in the east fighting the giants. And by the way, what do the giants represent? In this case, the Thursas. They represent ignorance. He's a god of the mind. He's out there pounding away against ignorance so that you can become more conscious, you can become more aware. He is a god of the mind. He's not a god with a short temper. It's not him. He's not a bull in a china shop. He's a lot. We should probably talk about him a lot more. But I have such respect for him and such awe for him, especially under these circumstances. It's kind of like you don't play around with that kind of energy. Okay. Let's see here. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions. So I don't know how much more I have to talk about here. It's just that I guess I kind of just want to share with you, I guess I do have something I can say here. I was thinking about this earlier today. You know, I'm thinking about this because I'm thinking about I want to do some videos that are appropriate for this time of year, right? And I thought I'd start talking about the Christmas tree. And as I started going into the Christmas tree, all this other stuff that I've been sharing with you starts coming up. And it's very hard for me now to think of the world tree and not think of that experience that I am still having. That when I saw what I believe to be, at least for that moment, the world tree, the nexus point of all the universes was right in front of me. What's interesting is that picture, when I've showed it to people, they see faces in the rocks. They see animals and they see faces. And, so it's almost like this ancestral, from this ancestral energy, comes this world tree. And I don't talk about it a lot. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to analyze it. I don't want to turn it into like a where's Bigfoot kind of thing. I don't want to minimize it or, infantilize it to that degree because it's too sacred for me. And because I have such intense respect for that tree, like I said, I don't have any plan on ever going back there. And that, for me to say that is a lot because I'm not afraid of a lot of things. But I am more than happy to let that place be where it is, because what happened is I went and it's like somebody went doink. And then just everything in my life just went through transformation. Like I said, I had what are those things called? A hernia. I had a hernia and I had to go in and get operated on, and I've been healing ever since. And I haven't really, and now, now that my partner has passed, I think now finally I'm able to want to now step back and see what this year has been. And what it has done to me and the transformative effect. And maybe now I can begin to heal myself from it. And begin to get myself, and I haven't felt like myself since then. So I can't go back to who I was. I have to allow myself to be transformed. And so I'm in that process now of sort of being able to finally sort of look at it and go, okay, what is it that I want to become? And so what I wanted to talk about was that, I'm not the only person that's had that kind of a year. There are other people that have that. And I think this has everything to do with the solar eclipse that happened not too long ago. And that solar eclipse, was in Leo, which is me, and it went over the continental United States. So I don't think we're done with what that did. Again, I made that video. I made a couple of videos on the lunar eclipse and all that. Did I say solstice? I meant eclipse. The lunar eclipse, when the eclipse went over the United States. And made a couple of videos about it, but, I'm now starting to really see what that's done. And talking to other people, I was talking with my previous landlord today, and he wanted to know, and I told him about the passing of Lisa, and he shared with me that he had a handful of friends and family members that all passed away this fall season. And we could get into all of this stuff that's going on politically. I wanted to say this, something has definitely changed, and mark my words on this. The United States has gone past a point of no return. We are not going to be what we have been. The time of the United States being the ruler of the world has come and gone. And the latest manifestation of this has been Trump's declaration that East Jerusalem is going to be the capital of Israel. Now, I'm not going to get into a political debate about what's right and wrong and whatever, but to make that kind of a statement without conferring with other world leaders, I mean, forget about not conferring with the Palestinians or other Arab nations. Not conferring with other European leaders, and then just making that unilaterally. That is going to offset the influence of the United States, and we will not be able to recover from that. And I'm saying this because I think this is a direct result of the solar eclipse. For him to do that, that would never have happened, wouldn't have happened with any other president, but it certainly wouldn't have happened at any other time. And we can debate whether or not that was a good idea or a bad idea, but you know, we've seen it now with, you know, Germany has come out and said, you know, in no uncertain terms, I don't know the exact quote, but they said, going forward, no matter who's president, our relationship with the United States has changed, which means they're going to make decisions without conferring with us. We used to be the head of the table. We used to be the head of the council, and you know, other nations and you know, other allies would fight with us and disagree with us, but we still had this sort of veto power over all of it. And whatever, we led the way. We set the tone for international relations. That's gone now. It's going to continue to degrade. Watch what happens. Now you've got France. France has said openly, you know, bring all of the United States scientists over here and we'll work on global warming. Come over to France. You know, if you're not welcome in the United States, come over here. Openly in defiance. I mean, not that anything's going to happen, but that's a big deal. For Germany to say, we're going to go on our own, we're not going to confer with the United States anymore. Do you want to know whose idea that was? There are two people who share that idea. Osama bin Laden. The reason why he launched his attack on United States soil was because he knew that the United States would then launch an all-out war on Islam. And he knew that if we launched an all-out either religious, political, you know, even news war against Islam, then you've got all these other Islamic countries that aren't anti-United States. They will have to then align themselves against us. And we did exactly that. And so that in itself, our reaction to 9/11 is what created the serious problem we have now with things like ISIS and things. Those things would not have been as easy to create. For instance, like Iran. Iran, even though they're our enemies, the Iranian people, after 9/11, were very aligned with us. They really felt for us. And then Bush came out and he called them, you know, the axis of evil, making enemies of people who would have been our friends, or at least the population, you know, the average person walking down the street. They're now forced to be our enemy because we've declared some kind of war against them. The other person that wanted to achieve what's happening now, which is the destabilization of our political influence over Europe and the world. To destabilize that was Putin's idea. Putin's been wanting to do that for a long time. That's what Russia wants. Because without us in control of the European Western allies, then they can do whatever they want. They can invade whoever they want and they can annex whoever they want, and they don't have to worry about us. And now you've got things like Germany doing their own thing, France doing their own thing, and nobody's going to listen to the United States anymore. Who knows how long? We still have probably the most powerful military, but who knows for how long that's going to happen. That is all a result of the solar eclipse coming in, which is what Rahu does. So I can feel out there, I know that there are people out there that are fuming with me because now I'm talking politics and I'm skewering their sacred cows, and you know they don't want to hear me do that. But you know, if you're a spiritual practitioner, you got to get rid of you got to drop the politics. You got to drop it on both sides. You got to drop the right wing. You got to drop the left wing. You got to drop whatever, you know, whatever team. Because that's the whole idea. Politics is trying to divide us into teams. And we're in a new phase right now. We are not in Kali Yuga anymore. We're in the state that's called half and half, which means that half the people are going to be conscious and the other half are going to be unconscious. It means half of the world population is going to be holding on to old ideas that don't work anymore, and the other half are going to be aware, and there's going to be this split right down the middle. We're not going to have factions anymore, and it's going to be more extreme. So the extreme is going to get worse in a political sense. And if you're walking a spiritual path, you have got to be willing to look at your emotional agendas. And you've got to be willing to ask yourself, what in my fear-based emotional agendas is making me want to go to one side or the other? And if you have an extreme view, again, this is why I go after people who have these, you know, the conspiracy theories. And it doesn't matter what it is. You know, it's like everything. You know, the one guy asked a question about, you know, were mountains once trees of life that were cut down? It's an interesting thought, although it's scientifically not true. But I know it's already connected to this conspiracy idea that there's this world that existed and we've been told a lie, and, you know, you can't believe anything that you're told. You can't believe what's in front of you. You have to believe, you know, that's extreme thinking. Gets you in that fear. We've got people who get their information not from, they're not looking to see what the truth is. I want to get information. They're going to whatever source of information pushes their emotional buttons and gets them all fired up, regardless of whether it's true or not. There used to be a time, you know, there used to be a law. I don't know if you know this. There used to be a law that when whenever a news channel gave out a news story or news commentary, that by law there had to be representatives of both sides. That was a law. That law has since been struck down. Do you want to know by who? The right. Because they don't want that. They want to have their side only. And you forced then these other CNN and Rachel Maddow to have to come out and sort of be the antithesis of Fox News. So I'm not saying that again to try and piss you off. I'm saying you really got to ask yourself, when you're trying to get information, are you honestly wanting to find out the truth, or are you going and choosing from all of the channels and all of the YouTubes that's available to you that you know will tell you what you want to hear, so that you can get all riled up and be pushed into one of your sections, getting pushed into one of your sides? If you're a spiritual practitioner, you have to be willing to be beyond that. If you want to be in that place of sitting in that nexus, you have to be beyond that, or you will be taken apart. You know, anyway, I could go on and on and on, but it's going to get more and more difficult to. It's going to get more and more difficult to hold on to your emotional agendas and follow a spiritual path. It's going to get harder because of this. And so the only way out is to let go of all that, to die to all that stuff, to die to whatever your team is. You got to die to your team and be willing to be in the central place, in the nexus of that power, which doesn't necessarily need to take a position one way or another. It's just there in the middle of it all. All right. So I know now I pissed a lot of people off, and hopefully I can survive without getting any weird-ass stuff. All right. So let me take a look at the questions here. Can you tell us more about Tyr? I will. I will be happy to talk about Tyr. Tyr is a really great subject. If there were somebody at the apex of this Axis Mundi, it would be Tyr. Now, Tyr in modern times is seen as a war god. And this is, for me as an astrologer, it's hard for me to classify Tyr, because if I go by the conventional thinking, then I'm going to put him as a Mars god. But I don't think he is a Mars god. The reason for that is, he has, his name etymologically comes from the same root as Jupiter. Jupiter, father of Diu, the sky. Sky father, Jupiter, sky father. Tiu is his name. So the root of Jupiter is Tiu. Same with Zeus. Zeus is the vocative, I believe. It's the vocative of D. Deus. When you're calling somebody, you're calling D by his name, Deus, I believe. So his name isn't Zeus, his name is D. The king of the North Star, the celestial emperor of the North Star in the Chinese tradition, his name is Di. This is Diu. This is Tyr. What's important for me about Tyr is that he was obviously, in the Indo-European tradition, he was the celestial emperor. He's not anymore. In the Norse tradition, he's not. He takes a different position. We can't classify him anywhere. He's sort of off in his own little thing. But in the myth, he is fighting with Fenris. And the way that I experience this is that, again, when they bound up Fenris, Fenrir, the wolf who represents our basest instincts to consume without end, to consume unendingly, and which the destruction of what they were afraid of, the gods, as the wolf pup Fenris was growing, they were afraid he was going to swallow up the universe. His mouth was that big. So he represents that unending aspect of Rahu. He's the son of Loki, so he is an aspect of Rahu. So he represents the aspect of Rahu which represents the obsessions that can never be satisfied. The addiction, he represents addiction. You can never satisfy it. The more you eat, the more you need, and it kills you, and it doesn't empower you, it disempowers you. And so the gods, when they decided they out of fear, the gods are afraid. They're in Asgard, and they are afraid of this wolf pup. He's not even full grown by this time. And they're wanting to tie him up. And the only thing that will tie him up is subtlety. Whatever is like the lips of chickens and the footfalls of cats and the beard of women, or something like things that don't exist. It represents subtlety. And when they put the rope on him and he broke through the rope, they put chains on him, he broke through the chains, and they tested him and they said, "We'll put this thread on you." And he said, hang on. What is this? He knew that the gods were up to something. What is this? What are you doing with this? Oh, don't worry. This is just a thread. You're so strong. You can break through it. And it was a magical thread made of subtlety. And Fenris says, well, yeah, if one of you puts your hand in my mouth, you can try, because if I can't get out, you're going to have to let me out, is the idea. And if you don't let me out, I'll take your hand off. So as insurance policy, put your hand in my mouth. And Tyr was the only one. So he represents the highest awareness, represents the apex. He represents the roof of the sky. He represents the North Star. He represents, the celestial emperor of the North Star doesn't mean he sits up there and rules. He represents the highest awareness. This is why the Tiu rune represents victory, because you attain victory by having your highest objective awareness. And so he stuck his hand in there. And we all know what happened. Fenris didn't get out, and guess who lost his hand? Now, the way I experience that is not that he lost his hand and he's walking around without a hand. No. His hand, he's still in there. His hand is still in there. And they are in this continuous battle. I think also he put a sword through his or some point. Anyway, I'm getting my timeline mixed up. But there's a sword going through his mouth, which represents the Kundalini rising to the highest chakra. And there's Tyr in there wrestling with him. I see them in this continuous battle. And Tyr isn't trying to destroy him. Tyr is trying to keep him contained so that we can live our lives. Because if our highest awareness wasn't there holding on to the basis of our instincts, we would all be zombies. That's what zombies are. That's why we are so afraid of zombies. That's why we have movies about them. They eat what? Your brains. They have to eat your brains, and you can't talk to them. They're not aware. That's so frightening to us, because that represents the instincts within us that we are afraid are going to overtake us. Our anger, our fear, our lust, our greed. We're afraid of that overtaking our awareness, so that we just become, when we look at serial killers, when we look at diabolical, whatever, bad guys, evil people. That's what that represents. It represents Tyr. The Tyr in them is gone. They don't have any higher awareness having any influence over their awareness of their own instincts. So those are my thoughts about Tyr and Fenris. Black Messiah Sidekick. I did a blood over intent under Thor. Did he seem it? I don't know. Blood over intent, listen, I made a video about blood over intent, and my own, to be honest, I was trying to get my channel to, I was looking for ways to get more views and stuff like that. And if you see it, I say that doing blood sacrifices has power. And that was all I really wanted to say. I didn't want to get into all the other stuff, but did he see it? I mean, you did it under Thor? I don't know what that means. Did you do a blood sacrifice to Thor? I mean, if you do a sacrifice to any of the gods, they're going to see it. But I wouldn't make a big deal out of it, and I wouldn't get too wrapped up over it. Blood over intent. The only thing that's valuable about blood over intent is that you're trying to intend a reality and you're using blood. That's it. There's nothing, other magical about it. That's all. And you don't have to do the whole blood over intent ritual to get the benefit of, and I'm not even promoting that you have to do that. I've done it once or twice just by pricking my finger and giving it to, whoever I was working with. So I'm not trying to make a big deal out of that, and I don't think it should be made a big deal. Question, Sifu, I am going to night shift. Do I have to do anything different with my chant and Qigong? I don't think so. Have you noticed energetic differences with doing ritual at night? Yeah, I prefer to do rituals at night, but that's because I'm a night kind of person. Some people enjoy doing it in the pre-dawn hours. That's a very powerful time, by the way, at dawn during the day. So you may see some differences, but doing ritual and Qigong at night is actually, the celestial Qigong is the best time to do it. So there you go. Raising vibrations question, if it's not too late, what about ghosts? Do you believe that ghosts are real? Yes, I've talked about that. They're all different kinds of ghosts. But I'll say that what ghosts are is, and I'm saying the typical ghost, there are all kinds of ghosts. But what ghosts are, the kinds of ghosts that walk around and they don't know what year it is, and they're doing the same thing every night. If they committed suicide every night, they're jumping off the cliff and committing suicide. Those are people's lower self. Again, if you're new to my channel, go and watch the videos about the three selves. This is your lower self. This is why it's so important to align the three selves, because if you're not aligned with, your three selves are not aligned, and you have a lot of unfulfilled emotional desires when you die, or if you die under tragic conditions and you're in the midst of trying to make something happen, then what happens is your lower self gets squeezed out. and it becomes a ghost. What happens with those kinds of ghosts is they will hang around sometimes for hundreds of years, keep playing out their emotional agenda until they kind of run out of steam. And then what ends up happening is that they lose their connection to the ego that they were attached to. So you have a lower self. Your lower self has adopted your ego. It's your, it identifies itself as you, but it's not. And so what happens is if it gets unnaturally, that's an unnatural kind of a death. It gets squished out onto the earthly plane. Then it flies around and thinks it's you, even though your soul is actually somewhere else and might even have turned into another person. I mean, because they last for hundreds of years. Then after a few hundred years, then they will kind of lose that connection to that identity. Then they become an earth spirit. And then they'll go back into and what they'll look for is they'll look for, some kind of natural place. They'll go off into the desert, or they'll go off into the mountains, or they'll go off into the woods, and they'll become an earth spirit. So, and then they'll either get a chance to come back as somebody's lower self, or who knows what. So that's my thought about ghosts. Kind of fun, huh? Okay, let's see if there are any questions here. I'm not seeing any question marks. Question marks, question marks, question marks. Q. Okay, so EH, so that's question. So if you would write out question for me, I can see it now, but if there were a lot of comments, I wouldn't see it. Question. I know this chat might be more about the origin of the Christmas tree, but I'm currently going through what I believe to be a Kundalini crisis. I don't know what your question. That was a statement. Do you have a question about your Kundalini crisis? I don't know what to tell you. You just put a statement out there. So you're going to have to give me a question. Okay, so you've just made a bunch of, yeah. Okay, here we go. He's going to write his question now. Are twin flames real? Yes, they absolutely are real. I think you emailed me, didn't you? You emailed me and you wanted to get into a big discussion about what your girlfriend did to you, and she put some kind of spell on you, and she put a demon inside of you, and something like that, right? Right? You writing your question? Just give me a right, yes or no, because we don't have all day here. So, no, that wasn't you? Okay, so what's your question? Come on. Time is a-ticking. Okay, you're somebody else. Okay, so I'm still waiting for your question. All right. So, I don't see any other questions here, so let's just take a little bit of a break here, and then we'll come back. Okay, so there's one question here what do you reckon is going on in the Antarctic? I don't know the context of your question. So what do I think is going on in the Antarctic? I think that the ice is melting. That's what I think is happening in the Antarctic. Again, obviously you're talking about something that I'm not aware of. My brain goes to, you're probably talking about some kind of conspiracy theory, something or other, and what do I think about that? I probably am not aware of it because I don't follow that stuff. But what I do know is that the ice is melting there. That's what I do know. All right, so EH, I've been asking you to put this in the form of a question. All right, and now you finally ask a question. Is it possible for demons to control the root chakra? As in, how can I be sure it's not a demon still trying to control me and not actually a kundalini trying to break through? You know, you're making a lot of assumptions that I don't necessarily know that I agree with. Is it possible for demons to do this, that, and the other thing? Yes. But if you have been watching my channel, which I suggest you do, you will hear me say over and over that nothing can harm you without your permission. Your assumption is that there's something that has the ability to harm you. And you're wrapped up in kundalini and demons, and it's all the same thing. Kundalini psychosis, demon possession, comes from the same place. You are out of balance. I can guarantee you you're trapped in your head because you want me to give you some intellectualization about kundalini versus the root chakra. That's all intellectualization. What you should be focusing on, in my opinion, is getting back to taking responsibility for your life. Take responsibility for everything in your life. I'm willing to bet that if I were to talk to you and I would ask you some questions, I would find out that there are a lot of unresolved psychological and emotional issues that are extremely frightening and painful for you. And the way that your mind and body has learned how to protect you from that is to create these diversions, illness, psychosis, demon possession. All of these things are real, but they are also ways that you divert yourself from what is really bothering you. And let me get to the core of that. You may not know this. It may take years to get you to the point where you can get to this place if you're a damaged person, if you've been through a lot of, if I ask you a lot of questions, I'm willing to bet that you've got a dysfunctional home relationship, dysfunctional parents, drug addiction, alcoholism, something like that in your family life, which means that you are having difficulty connecting to your soul and to your soul desire, doing what your soul wants you to do, doing that which gives you joy. So the bottom line is, you don't have to be wrapped up in all the specifics of whatever the symptom is. The kundalini psychosis, the demon, my root chakra, these are all symptoms of you being out of balance. You're out of balance because you're not following your soul. The way you know you're following your soul is that you're following what gives you the greatest joy in your life. And in my experience, all illness, all psychological problems, and I'm not trying to minimize them, there's a bunch of different, but they all come down to somebody is in conflict with themselves. They want to do something, they want to live a certain lifestyle, but as a kid, they were told they were bad if they did this, they were bad if they did that, and we create all these neuroses around it. And we spend our whole lives trying to avoid that. Bottom line is that you're in conflict with yourself. And you can ask me these kinds of questions, and I can tell you that whatever I would come up with is probably not going to solve the problem. You're probably going to need to work with somebody. I don't know that I have the time, and I don't even know, probably you wouldn't even be willing to pay what I would charge, but I would say you need to work with me once a week for an hour a week. We need to talk so that I can help you find out what your real problem is so you're not wrapped up in all this other nonsense. Not to say that it isn't real. I know that you have Kundalini psychosis. I know that your root chakra is going nuts. I know that you've had experience with demons. But again, those are all symptoms of an underlying deeper problem, which once you own that, once you work through those feelings, and once you take responsibility for everything in your life, then you won't have to ever deal with that kind of stuff again. But in order for me to help you, I'd have to talk to you, and I certainly can't do that in 5 minutes on here. So, yeah, look again. How do you know if you're in Kundalini psychosis? It's just an intellectual question. Don't focus on whether or not you're in Kundalini psychosis. Who cares? You either are or you aren't, so what? Focus on what I just got through telling you, which is find out what you really want to do and what's going to bring you joy. And do that regardless of what anybody in your family wants to tell you. I'm scrolling because I'm looking for this book here. I believe this book will solve a lot of problems. The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. If you don't want to buy the book, then you can go on to my YouTube channel and you can search for it. Again, how do you find, because again, YouTube is, people just get pulled away from one. So if people ask me questions, most of the time all those questions are answered if you watch my videos. So you got to put some time and some effort into actually watching the videos. And the way to search for what you want is you go on to my page, the thunderwizard.com, DOTC.com YouTube channel page. And then under my name, thunderwizard.com, you'll see a menu. It'll say videos, playlists, blah, blah, blah. And then it says about. Right next to about is a little search icon, which is a magnifying glass. Click on that. Type in Kundalini. And you can watch all my videos on Kundalini and Kundalini psychosis and find out what all that's about. You can also type in the Shamanic Secret Commandment. Type that in and watch those videos. That's the root of your problem. And I'm not trying to minimize it. It may take you time to work through that, but going over what is Kundalini psychosis, what is the blah, 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 that's all your head. That's all that's your intellect, just trying to keep you trapped in that craziness. So that would be my question. If you removing demons, you probably created. Okay, that's a statement. Question. Just wanted to say thank you. You for real. You are awesome. Okay, that's one way people get my attention. Thank you for that. Raising vibrations. I do not see any more questions. So I think I'm kind of out of stuff to say for today, other than what I really wanted to focus on was this idea of transformation. And this idea of transformation is not just let's transform ourselves. It's a complete redefinition of who you are. It is a death. It is a shamanic initiation. It's being torn apart and allowing yourself to get put back together. For me, what I am working through is thinking about this path that I'm continuing to create and realizing that in the state that I'm in, I'm too limited to be able to reach where this path wants to go in me. And if I'm the person that's supposedly, channeling this path, this information, I can see that I'm going to have to be torn apart. My limitations are going to have to be blown apart in order for me to reach that infinity. That's the thing about infinity. We talk about infinity a lot. I talk about it a lot. And I talk about how blissful it is and how wonderful it is. But, again, if we were to walk into full infinity, which is Gununga Gap. Gununga Gap is that emptiness that is full of everything. It's not empty meaning there's nothing there. It means everything is in there, but it has not been solidified. It has not been limited. It has not been marginalized by becoming something. It hasn't been solidified into something. Because once you become something, then in order to grow past it, you have to be destroyed. Like an egg. It's like you live in an egg. Your egg has to be destroyed. the barriers of you, which is you, your identity of who you are, meaning who I am, what I like, what is this, what is that, what I believe. This is why, by the way, I'll tell you why people are so interested now in all of these conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories, and I'm not saying that conspiracies don't exist. I know they do. I could go off on the ones that exist, not the ones you think exist maybe, but I could tell you about the ones that do exist that you're either not paying attention to or letting them snow you. You're letting them completely snow you. But I don't want to get into that because I don't want to go there. But conspiracy theories and your enemies. Think of all the things that you think are your enemies. The things that you think are your enemies are defining your limitations. They are limiting you. This is why people are so afraid right now. This is why there are so many conspiracy theories. This is why there is Islamic terrorism. This is why there is right-wing fundamentalism. This is why there is left-wing anarchism. Everybody has an enemy that they're fighting. And they're fighting that they're creating and supporting and manifesting these enemies because they are afraid of going into that place of true infinity, which is the universe is taking us there. But you have to die. You know, bringing it back to myself, it's hard to talk about this, not because I'm going to get emotional about it, but it's because I really want to be respectful. You know, I lost my partner 2 months ago to cancer. She physically died. But there's a reason why she and I were both brought to this tree. It's because in order for us to work as a team and to have our soul connection continue, and I don't know if this is true or not, but what's coming to me now is her saying she had to expand, that her mind could only go so far. And if she were to stay in the physical form, she wouldn't have been able to keep up with me. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what popped into my head. So this was her doing, and this you know, expression of Jupiter coming to us in the form of this world tree that felt like being in the midst of Gununga Gap, the perfection of the source of the universe, which I felt like it was killing me. That had to happen in order for her and I to be able to continue to work together. Whatever the hell that means, I don't know. You know, but I had this experience as I'm looking up at that tree, and I went into trance, and you know, the world tree was saying to me, you know, are you willing to die to what you know of who you are? Are you willing to die to the limitations of yourself? Are you willing to die so that you can expand to be able to hold what we want to bring through you, all the ancestors? You know, I got to be really clear about that. I wasn't like at the foot of the tree of my Norse ancestors. That would have been fine. That would have been enough. I would have been happy with that. I was at the foot of the tree of the ancestors of everybody, of all beings, of all consciousness. That's why it was so frightening to me. That's why it was in my brain could not comprehend the power that I was seeing and experiencing. Felt like it was killing me. This is where we're starting to go. This synthesis. I'm a syncretic shaman. I am a Norse of Norse ancestry. I'm a modern Norse shaman. I'm doing the best I can with that. But that does not limit or define who or what I want to allow to teach. You know, if you really are truly a shaman, you want to go this path, you've got to be willing to get rid of all those limitations, while at the same time honoring all of them, and realize that, you know, we were one tribe once, probably 150,000 years ago. And then we spread all over the world. And each of us went off to learn different things. And my ancestors went off to learn fire. The runes are fire, by the way. My ancestors went off to master fire. But now we get to come back together. And when all of these things come together, it's going to be more powerful than anything I can comprehend at this moment. And that's where I feel like the universe is saying, that's where we want to go. We want you to be one of the channels for this. So we need for you to be willing to be taken apart. And I know I'm not alone. I know that everybody that's come to me, and a lot of you that are listening to me, that are my students, either you've had that experience. Listen, I'm not tooting my own horn here. I honestly, I don't have the experience of being other than just a mortal human. I swear to you. I'm no different than any of you. I don't walk around with this feeling that I'm a god. Look, I don't have that experience at all. I'm just as human as any of you. Trust me. But I know what the experience has been of people who have worked with me. And they, every day on the phone, they tell me that when you work with me and you're done, you hang up the phone, and then boom, all that energy flies through you, and everything comes flying apart, and you get a ton of energy. I am going through the same thing that you guys are going through, and it's coming through me. And I'm not saying, again, it's not about me. It's about what wants to happen down the road here. And the ancestors, the gods, the powers that be, are putting this together, and we are going to enter into a phase of, I don't even know what it is. I can just tell you it's really powerful. What we would consider to be magic. It's going to be really, really huge, and I can't even put a word to it. So this transformation is coming, and the easiest way to go through the Yuhuaj rune is to surrender and go with it. Otherwise, you hang on to stuff, then you actually do start losing body parts because you're hanging on to something, it gets torn away, and your hand gets taken off, and your brain comes apart, and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know what I said, but I think I'm done saying it. So, if you want to, I'll check and see if there are any questions before I give up here for tonight. All right. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Why do my powers increase when I don't sleep or fast? I don't think they do increase. I think that's not a good sign. You need to sleep, and you need to eat. You might have an experience. Fasting can do things, maybe cleanse you. But if you're saying that you're having this experience that your powers are increasing because you don't sleep and you fast, that sounds like somebody who's going through what do you call that? There's a name for that. Where you're up and down all the time. What is that called? Anyway, it doesn't sound healthy. So I think that your experience of your powers increasing, I think that's an ego-related thing that you're doing to avoid real issues. I think there's some other real emotions there that need to be dealt with, and I think that your brain is trying to find ways to, whenever, especially when you feel like you're, gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue, but people go through this experience of feeling like they're on top of the world. They feel like that they've got increased sensory powers, and then they crash and they go down, and they go up and they go down, and it feels like that to me. So I don't think your powers are increasing. I think you're having kind of it's kind of a delusion. It's a delusion of when you're not eating and you're not sleeping, and so you're really strung out. That's what I think is happening. So I don't think your powers are increasing. So we can talk about that if you want. Here is one more question. EH says, when it comes to the chakras, that's always going to be true, by the way. When you ask a question, it will be one more question. You ever notice that people want to ask a question? Question, and then they ask a question. Like they have to tell you how to. Quick question, and then it's like, well, yes, go ahead. All right, so here is one more question, and the next one will also be one more question. When it comes to the chakras, are our bodies actually split into feminine and masculine on the left? Those are two different things. Your body is masculine and feminine, right and left. And when it comes to the chakras, what do the chakras have to do with that? Chakras are something else. Could you feel the feminine respond on your left through your chakra? I don't even know if you and I have the same understanding of chakra. So my friend, I would recommend that you do some research and get out of your head. You're really stuck in your head. You're wanting to intellectual. This is the normal thing. This is why I teach Qigong and meditation. You got to get back in your body. You have to experience things. That's the first thing that if somebody works with me in person, the first thing I do is I give them energy work to do so that they can get back in their body. I remember this guy that I knew years ago, and he was talking about, we were talking about meditation and yoga, and he says, oh, I meditate on the chakras all the time. And I go, oh, really? How? And he goes like this, and he pulled out a book. And I said, what do you mean? He says, oh, I read the book. I mean, you sit there and you read the book? And he goes, yeah. And I said, that's not meditation. That's not working with the chakras. That's thinking about the chakras. That's all your intellect. So I want to get you into real energy work. Talking about stuff is great, but energy work, Qigong, ritual, all that stuff is where your mind and your emotions and your physical body and your energy are all working together. Because we are all, this is what Christianity did. Christianity came in and started giving people intellectualized religion. That God is in heaven and there's hell below you and you have to believe in Jesus, and if you don't believe in Jesus, all this stuff is all intellectual. And the philosophers, by the way, Greek philosophers, the reason why Greece started churning out all of these philosophers, right before Christianity, was because Greece turned into an empire. And in the empire, within the cities, these walled cities, you have all of the elites who are getting all of their food and all of their resources from the human beings that they've conquered, who are out in the fields connecting to the earth, and they're sitting in their ivory towers all stuck in their head. And then they get into all of this philosophy. It's all intellect. If you can't take that philosophy and put it into real action, it's meaningless. It's just a way to escape. That's all it is. All of these questions that you're asking me, if you're new, I'm almost certain that you're stuck in your head. It makes me think you smoke a lot of weed. You sit around, you smoke weed, and then think about stuff all day, right? I know some of you do that at the very least. So I want to get you back into your body. And I want you to do some Qigong. And so go on my channel and do, this is a great pitch for doing the shamanism at thunderwizard.com. If you go to thunderwizard.com and sign up at $25 level and go all the way to the bottom, keep hitting more till you scroll all the way to the bottom and start and do those rituals and do those exercises that will put you back into your body. It will connect you emotionally and physically and to your energy, and then your mind will open up, and then you'll know what true mind is. True mind is not sitting around talking about the nature of this and parsing the this and the that, and it has, if you can't physically do something with that knowledge, it's worthless. Okay? That's what I try and teach. So anyway, that's not to attack anybody. That's just the reality that we have in our reality here. Bipolar, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say, Black Messiah. Having this feeling that your powers increase when you don't sleep or fast, it sounds bipolar. It sounds like you're having a bipolar kind of thing. So I don't think it's healthy for you. I think get into your body and learn what real power is. Okay. All right. How can you tell the difference between different beings you may feel or encounter. Too general of a question. You'd have to be more specific. Okay. All right. I think that's going to be it for me today. I've kind of, yeah, we're over 2 hours, so I will end this. I'm going to end this by saying to you guys, I am currently creating another program. This is going to be to certify people to do the kind of astrology that I do. Be aware that I'm a Vedic astrologer, but on top of that, I do a very specific kind of Vedic astrological reading. So it's not your average reading. If you go to an average Vedic astrologer, it's not going to be what I do. These are the kinds of things that I spent years studying and learning from other astrologers, and I picked out all the things that I found to be the most practical. Again, like I said, I don't care about it if I can't do something with it. If I can't physically experience it and do something with it, it's meaningless to me. So I want to give people tools that they can use to make their life better right now. Talk to anybody that's had a reading from me, they'll tell you, that's what I'm focused on. So for those of you, first off, I would suggest if you want to do that and you haven't, you should get a reading from me so you know what it is that I do in the readings. And then if you want to be part of that, go to info@thundershamanism.com. Info, I-N-F-O, at thundershamanism.com. People have a hard time writing Thunder Shamanism for some reason. Info@thundershamanism.com, and then put in the subject line, put Astrology Apprentice. And then I'll take all those and I'll put you guys into a little folder. When I'm done, I'm still creating the videos. I will then give you access to that program. There's going to be 2 levels. The first level is just teaching you, the basics of what I do to create a reading, which you can do for yourself and learn for yourself, or if you want to go into business and be an astrologer and you can do that, great. The second tier is going to be an actual certification course where I will personally test you to see that you are able to do it the way I would, because what I'm going to do is, because I am getting more astrology clients than I have time for, I'm going to take my quota that I need, and then above that I will farm them out to those whom I have certified. I will take a percentage and I will give you the bulk of it. But I have to know that you can do it as accurately as I would want. So I can say to these people, don't worry, it's just like having it with me, but you're going to do it with so-and-so instead. Okay? So if you want to do that, go to info@thundershamanism.com. The best way to support this channel is to go to thunderwizard.com and sign up at the $25 level. And my goal is to have 250 $25 subscribers. At the $25 level, you get access to the private videos that I do just about once a week, and you get access to all of them, so you can always go back. Trust me, the information in there, there's a lot of info in there that you can learn from. Runes, shamanism, thunder wheel, rituals, meditation, mantra, all that kind of stuff. All right, so that's it for me right now. Where are my glasses? And I'll check if there are any last minute questions in case there are, but if not, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Nope, no more questions. Okay, my friends, thank you so much. I appreciate this. May we all be prepared for the transformation that is coming and that has arrived. And I kind of also get this feeling, it may sound a little apocalyptic, but this has been the case for me throughout my life, that if you learn how to be in that place of emptiness, and bear in mind, emptiness doesn't mean nothingness, it means being pulled apart. If you learn how to be in that place of power and to try and stay as neutral as you can and flow with that power, then what ends up happening is all the stuff that people are afraid of, the apocalypses, the wars, the, pick it, whatever it is that you're afraid of. And they do happen. World War II happened. Nagasaki and Hiroshima happened. You know, these things do happen. When these times come, you will be spared. That's been my experience. And I could get into that as well. But the way to, if you really want to be spared from all of it, you have to go into the really scary part, which is not to be worried about all the stuff that's happening in the world and what this party is doing and what that's doing and the government and all that, but to go into the really scary place, which is to go into that, you know, that tree of life, walk into that and be willing to be pulled apart and lose your identity and find out, you know, identify with the infinite. When you get there, then you don't have to worry about the other stuff. You'll be spared all that. So that's all I have for now, my friends. Until next time, thank you so much. May the power of the ancestors be with you. And I shall talk to you guys soon. See ya.